Hello and welcome to another Terrace Extra. I am your host, Tony Anderson, and on this occasion, I'm joined by the main man himself. It's Mr. Craig Anderson, who's looking very well in a nice Hearts of Oak top there.
Yeah, no, clearly not Heart of Midlothian top, which I wouldn't be seen dead in. But yes, I thought I was told this was a YouTube one, so I thought I'd better dress up for it rather than just what I had on at my work today, which was quite boring. So I thought I'll make it colourful.
One day it'll be commonplace that you have to wear a Hearts top to do anything on the Terrace podcast.
I thought it's a wee nod to the the Jambos podcast that we're part of.
Yeah, and they're all really happy with how it's going at the moment. But funnily enough, they've not had any real decisions go against them, as far as I could see, over the recent weeks. It's all just been being shit, until obviously Celtic at the weekend was the first time where it all went. But we are here talking about the VAR review, which will not include those decisions due to when it was brought out for the first time. So something that I think people have been screaming and shouting for years. I know not just in VAR, but really just for there to be some sort of communication from the referees, even as a body, about decisions and how they're made, and something everyone's really been wanting to have. Unfortunately, we've only been able to get to this space through VAR, which is something most of us don't want, Craig. But ultimately, do you feel this type of show is necessary at this stage?
Well, yeah, I've said for a while, we should keep stating. I think pretty much everyone on this podcast is very much not in favour of VAR existing at all. But I've kind of said from the start, like, the least that you should be entitled to, I think, as a supporter in the stadium, if you are sitting in your seat and a decision gets made, something changes on the part of the referee's not giving it, that you are given some information about what that decision is. Now, we're not at that stage yet because the English Premier League are starting to do it not quite in real time, but close to real time, in terms of like every single VAR decision being some sort of communication of it. I appreciate that's expensive, but to me, it's like if you're sitting at a game and something gets given against your team and you don't know what it's for, I think you deserve that information, because it's different from a normal game of football where the referee makes a decision and it's made instantly. So someone gets sent off and you might think that's a bad decision, or a penalty gets given, you might think that's a bad decision, but very rarely do you think, what was that actually given for? Whereas like the VAR stuff changes that. And so I think it's been essential, this communication of some sort. Now, there's still flaws with it. It's still very controlled. It's still very much, it's like the decisions that are put forward are the decisions that Willie Collum wants to put forward.
Yeah.
But unlike, because I don't know if you remember, because Ewan and I spoke about, I think it was Ewan and I that did the show about the programme that went out on Sky last year, which was like a 1 year of VAR or whatever it was. And they did it. The only, was Crawford Allen did that show, the only single piece of negative thing where he claimed a wrong decision was made that they actually spoke about was about the way the referees communicated with each other. There wasn't one single decision they focused on that was a mistake, or that was deemed to be a mistake. And so I thought this was a definite shift in that respect, that Collum was happy to identify
wrong
decisions as well. I think Willie Collum's had a lot of stick for a long time, but I've always got the feeling that he's, maybe from his job as a teacher, he's maybe a better communicator and is probably quite forward-thinking as it comes. And so it's been very interesting that he has kind of taken this route, and he's been the one that's kind of put himself front and centre of this. Now, you can call it self-publicity, all the rest of it, but he's there to be shot at. That's his job. And I thought it's fair that he's kind of coming out and talking through decisions, and crucially, not just everything's perfect, everything's correct. Like, here's where things have gone wrong, or here's where things could have been done differently, or like that. So yeah, I think it's a massive positive step.
Right, so would you say that is the main positive from watching that first episode of the show? Do you think that's the thing that stands out the most?
Yeah, so there's the openness, the fact they're using the audio as well, and something again I think we can do a bit more is like people most of the time, I mean 99% of the time, the audio being released will shut down most of this debate from sensible people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking like the one that's on here, the St Johnstone Rangers one at Ibrox. After the game, a lot of the chat, including from, I was going to say a St Johnstone employee, it wasn't a St Johnstone employee, it was a Motherwell employee, Richard Foster, former St Johnstone player, who was on punditry, claiming that there had been a whistle and that the referees were lying. And
bold.
He's obviously been, he's been punished for that, but that audio being released immediately kills that idea stone dead, because the referee is, I can't remember if Willie Collum said it, and the referee is literally talking and shouting over the VAR the whole time, so he can't be blowing his whistle because you cannot blow a whistle and shout at the same time. So I think the audio being released is the big thing for me, because I think it's also to be quite interesting for a lot of people, not for everyone, but a lot of people are quite learning something new about how the referees communicate and about what's actually all the things that a referee's having to think about as the game's going on, and all the things that VAR are having to think about as well.
It's like I think that's the hook for the show. Is that you're spot on, that the communication's really what stops it being like completely dry, and the thing that you feel like you're actually getting insight, like you're saying that fans deserve. And I mean that for the fans in the stadium that we spoke about earlier, who obviously put money into the game that way. But again, also a lot of the people who watch it on the telly are still invested in the game through their subscriptions to Sky or whatever. So there is a level of people do deserve this. And getting that was coming up. I thought it was fun. Just obviously the first one they done, the James Forrest one, just listen to the referee screaming over and over for slow-mo. So. And it was almost like it was going to break into an argument because they wouldn't actually do what he was trying to do. And I quite enjoyed hearing everyone having to introduce themselves when they were doing the... Again, and this is when it comes to what we have to understand about, like, there's protocol. So you probably do have to, if I'm going to be talking, I have to say I am. Because if you're going to be releasing this, it all needs to be completely upfront, but it sounds quite funny when you're just listening.
And I don't think it was mentioned, but my understanding is that the communication most of the time is just one way. So as far as I'm aware, the referee can't normally hear what's going on in the VAR room unless they press a button to specifically talk to him. So they'll always hear the referee and the on-field officials' audio. But the on-field officials, so a lot of that chat that's going on, Colin will just be, whoever the referees are, will just be told hold it, and then they might give them the odd update. But I don't, because
otherwise it would be absolute pandemonium,
because he's trying to talk to the players at the same time, and
you're shouting and swearing in their face.
Yeah, and so I think that's maybe something that's there. But yeah, there's a lot. I mean, because there's a lot going on. Because there's 3 people in the VAR booth for every game. So there's a VAR themselves, the main one. There's an assistant VAR. But there's also a guy that's like just doing the tapes, like not a referee, but just the guy. He's the one that's being told, "Can we see the other angle? Can we check this?"
Getting screamed at.
And it's obviously quite.
He's gonna get, like the players take it out on the refs. The refs are now going to take it out. It's going to get passed down, and to this guy on tapes is going to get berated at all times.
And I remember when those jobs were being advertised before the VAR had even been agreed by the clubs. It's not a very well paid role, but then it's not a full time role, obviously. But yeah, so that part of it's really, I think, interesting for people to see the amount of communication that goes on between officials, and that's, to be honest, been true even pre-VAR in terms of the referees talking to their assistants and talking to the players. We'll get on to obviously an example of that happening quite notably. But yeah, I think that's the main benefit to me.
Do you feel that this is the best way of delivering this show? Do you think this is the best vessel for doing it?
The best way is, to me, the best way is that the audio's live all the time, but I can understand that they're not going to want that, and that's probably never going to happen. And the next best thing might be literally every single time VAR is involved in a decision, whether it be not making a decision or making it, i.e. every time the referee's been told, every time there's a review, that there's something released which summarises what happens in that review. But all of these things are expensive and time consuming. So I don't really see any other way.
At the moment of doing that, yeah.
Like in the short term, if this takes off and people really, really like it, then maybe there is scope for more than this. But yeah, I thought it was a really nice way to do it in terms of having specific incidents focused on. But you'll notice, yeah, they're talking about a specific incident, but they're also educational from the point of view of the laws as a whole. So it's not just like, so for example, the handball from Rangers v Hearts in there. Yes, it's explicitly about the Rangers v Hearts decision, but we're also seeing that he's using it as an opportunity to explain the higher bar in handball and how it's been interpreted. And I think we saw that at the weekend with Hearts not getting a penalty against Celtic, for example. There are still penalties being given for handball for incidents that I would prefer not to be handballs, but that are much more clear cut in terms of what the rules currently are. Whereas like some of the penalties, in Collum was saying that himself, some of the penalties that were being given last season were a nonsense. And I'm hoping, and we are seeing evidence so far that that's no longer being the case.
Would it be, now that we have the show in place, would it be good to do a show before the football starts now about the changes and then use decisions from the season before and literally say, these are ones that wouldn't be getting given. So use the example. So basically like what Willie Collum was doing then, and then use examples of last season and say the reason we're not going to give these is for X, Y, and Z. And then do it as sort of like a bite-sized way of making sure that the main sort of most debated parts of the rules, because most football fans have got the basics down. You know, like most people that do have the sort of like mundane rule making of football, is they do have that down. But as these, we all know it's offside, it's phases of play, it's handball. You know, these are the bits, the subtleties that change, and they change quite often, especially in recent years, as we've always argued. And the reason is we're letting VAR dictate the rules rather than vice versa. But would you think it'd be quite nice to now have like a sort of pre-season show exactly like this?
I think so. And they do, as far as I'm aware, they do presentations to managers and clubs anyway. So the material will be there in the summer to say, right, this season, here's what's... They can do this season, here's what's changed in the laws of the game. Because every year the laws of the game get updated a wee bit. There's a lot of misinformation about what actually changes a lot of the time. Like, it'll come out that X, Y, and Z is happening, and then you see that the laws actually come out and it's nothing like that. So it'd be good. Here are the explicit changes that are made, and then also here are some examples of how we're going to do things differently.
Yeah.
And Colin was in the papers a bit, so there were wee like snippets leaking out. But yeah, there wasn't anything as like explicit and something that can be referred back to as well. So if you're having an argument online, if you're talking about an incident, or if you're ready for a podcast, we can say, look, Willie Collum said at the start of the season, this was what was going to happen. So therefore that decision is correct or not.
And then we don't have to have
that. It's not like, ongoing... oh, well, you know, they do this in Italy and they do this in Spain and that's that. And
then we don't have to have these tedious conversations forever and ever. Amen. Craig, I suppose, what the pitfalls you envisage then of this?
I think they're very obvious. I think you're seeing them already, which is twofold. First of all, people not watching it and then commenting on it, because I saw...
Yeah, these are people like me. I mean, I've watched it for this review, but I'm exactly this arse.
Because I saw quite a few people have decisions over the weekend saying, "I can't wait till Colin shows this on his programme and explains it away." And it's like, well, no, if you watched it back, like, there were a couple of decisions where they're like, no, they got that wrong.
Yeah.
So, like, they're not clearly not. So if you've watched the programme, I don't know how you could come out with that. But more, that's just like, that to me is like your low level moaning prick football fan. Like, you just get there's no way
we can.
We can.
They're insatiable. There's no way you can feed that guy.
That person's fine, because that person is quite harmless and quite low level, and they moan about everything. They moan about the manager. They just like to moan. But there's a kind of insidious, like, mainly Old Firm, but not entirely Old Firm, the insidious, like, conspiracy theorist types who will be storing this up, like, as ammunition, basically. So it'll be like, here's what Willie Collum said about this entirely different decision 4 months ago. So why is this decision not being given that way? And you already see that's always been a thing, and it's always been the biggest pitfall. You also saw even the BBC the way they reported this show was like, Collum admits that Hearts should, I can't remember, Collum admits that Celtic should have had a penalty against Kilmarnock. It's like, that's quite an irresponsible way to frame the story to me.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, yes, it's true. It's not, there's no question that is the fact that he felt that decision, which was at like 3-0 and made no difference to the game. Anyway.
But language matters, and it's very important. Language is really important, and we see it every single day in all facets of life.
I think you have to be careful because it's very much something that if there's too much of that and the referees are starting to feel the heat of it, it won't happen anymore. So it's like I kind of be careful what you wish for. If you are stoking the flames with the discussion of this stuff, rather than being sensible about it and rather than taking it as what it is, which is a big step forward from what we've had before, you end up back with nothing. And like, I think we should embrace the fact that someone's willing to come out and communicate.
And do you think the refs are okay? Do you know? I mean, I'm going off kilter here. I mean, do you know if the referees were discussed with this before this went forward?
No idea, to be honest.
That'd be quite interesting. Because again, these pitfalls, if that hasn't been the case, then you can imagine if they're not part of that decision, then you can imagine that the speed that they get pissed off with it would probably be faster.
I think, Collum's quite a big character and whatever. Obviously, he's been quite a big, so it makes it a bit easier for him to make that decision. My feeling is from when I was refereeing, it'll be mixed. Like, there were a lot of referees that I worked with who were like very keen on talking about decisions, being quite open, being chatty. Those were generally the ones that got higher up. But then you had your kind of officious, like, ones with like terrible attitudes, and there are a few of them in the Premiership.
Yeah, of course.
Like Andrew Dallas is the one that springs to mind, an absolutely awful attitude as a referee every time he's on the park, which is why I think he's been stuck away in the VAR booth now, because the way he dealt with players, the way he spoke to players was like, to me, unacceptable, like just like a bully. And that type of person is never going to me, be in favour of this kind of thing, because their default position is like, I'm right all the time. I don't care. I don't need to explain myself to these people. There's a couple more out in the Premiership just now who you can probably say the same about, but I would say the majority that doesn't apply to, and I would say the majority will be
in favour of
it. But that's speculative, I would guess, rather than
again, like you're saying, it's nicer for them if it's rather than them have to go and do it when it's all like, you know, it's all really raw right at the end of full time. Like, we know what happens with managers with through that. We wouldn't want really that. I mean, it would be fun from our point of view for refs, but you know, in reality, for people and how they feel, that wouldn't be the best thing. Maybe it's good if it's like one guy who comes out and does it for everyone, speaks on behalf of everyone, as long as he's in that communication with them. And as long as, and like you're saying, the way things are framed and the language used is important, that it still feels supportive and it's not about calling people out and being overly negative.
I think that's going to be the difficulty, because if there's a referee and a referee team and a VAR that have been shown to make a mistake,
and then they're on it three times,
and then the next show is them making a mistake again, because actually wasn't that one on the Celtic Hibs game was Andrew Dallas, right? And Andrew Dallas was the VAR for the Kelly St Mirren game, which had a lot of decisions in it. You would be surprised if that game doesn't feature in the show. It then creates a situation where are you having the head of referees coming out and basically every month picking the same, saying this guy got that wrong, this guy got that wrong again, this guy got that. It becomes harder to say, well, because I think the way they were presenting it was, we identified this as a mistake, we've given it to all the refs as a coaching point. And I saw people moan about that, saying, oh, they've been refereeing for 20 years, why do they need coaching? But I'm like, do you think Brendan Rodgers turns up at the training grounds at Celtic on Monday morning and says, you don't know what you're doing? Like, everybody needs coaching all the time, that's not a problem. But it becomes harder to say over and over again that someone needs coaching if you coach them and there's not evidence that things are changing. That's a challenge, I think.
Well, you're talking about coaching, so that probably moves us on nicely to referees coaching players during a game, which is what's been accused of the referee in the Tom Lawrence case when he's running back. So I think firstly, I would say this was the biggest thing that caused controversy from the show in social media. And I suppose we've got to section this down a bit. firstly, what's your personal take on that type of behaviour from a referee on the pitch? Then secondly, how common is it? So you can have an opinion, Craig, and how common it is, and these things can be different, of course.
So it's widespread. I think I felt like you saw a lot of people basically saying anyone who's moaning about this has never played football at any sort of decent level. Because to me, when you see the better referees, they never shut up. Like they're just constantly talking throughout the game. And I've seen it like officially, like the main situations you'll see it is crosses coming into the box.
Yeah,
at
this is annoying to some people.
Yeah,
me,
you and I spoke a little bit about this on our one of the episodes. I think it's out now, the Laws of the Game episode, when we were talking about fouls before the ball was in play and stuff like that, and how referees are, and that was definitely something that I did a lot when I refereed, is when I could see
what's happening.
Because you know, apart from anything, I decide if you've got a corner or a set piece coming in, everybody on the ground hates a foul being given straight after a corner. Like, because it's like either your team's got an attacking corner and then all of a sudden...
Plus the game's just been stopped and then it's stopping again. Yeah.
Or like a penalty's been given and that's a big flashpoint. And you, to me, you don't actually really ever want penalties to be given from a dead ball situation, because it's like... I'm not saying you don't give them. I'm saying...
Yeah. You prefer
I think
not.
it's like it feels unearned somehow. It's like, oh, here's a corner comes into the box and a guy's just pulled. Do you know what I mean? It's not like someone's run at a fullback and been hacked out.
That isn't for the referees to decide.
No, it's not. And I'm not saying that you wouldn't give the decision, but I'm saying like so I've always felt, and I always did when I was refereeing, like even talking about youth football and stuff, I would be like, when the corner was before it was getting hit, I'm like, okay, everybody hands down, no fouls, keep it clean.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that kind of thing. And if you specifically spot a couple of people at it, you will preemptively go over and say, look, I've got my eyes on you, don't do anything stupid, there will be a foul.
But also, is there a discussion? I'm playing devil's advocate here, obviously. I mean, that's the only way this kind of thing would work. But is there not something to be said that, like, constant coaching and talking through youth football, where you have a duty of care with young people, and there's a level of we're trying to develop young players through that, is different than it is like a professional footballer playing at Hampden?
Yeah. The referee's got a duty of care though as well, right? The referee's got a duty of care to protect
that
the players, I would
not
argue.
Get injured. Is that what you would? Is that the angle you would go down there?
Yeah. I would say, like, I think it's not. I don't think that's something every single referee will be doing to that extent, but I could definitely say it, because the referee's looking, to me, the referee, one of the things that they should always be doing is identifying potential flashpoints and trying to prevent them from happening, because not only it's not about just, oh, I don't want to give a red card here, which is part of it. A referee generally wants to keep all the players on the park. It makes everyone's life easier, including their own.
But
the aspect that if there ends up being a red card, if there ends up being a bad tackle, the game boils over. If there's nothing, if the game is not boiled over, if the game is kind of calm, that the referee wants to go off the park. In most cases, most referees anyway, they want to go off the park having given out 0 cards. It doesn't mean that they achieve that. In most games they don't, because when the cards come, when the decision is there, they have to make it. But they'll be really happy to be driving home having thought, I've had the fun afternoon there, I've not had anything in my face, I've not had these difficult decisions. The tricky part is for a referee, and it's something a lot of them fail at, being brave enough that when there is a decision to be made, you don't just lean on that at that point. It's like,
you want
the easy life, but it's not your job. But I think taking preemptive action, I would argue, I can see the argument that you're making, Tony, very much so, that you're influencing the game. But at the same time, as long, again, as if you're doing that consistently throughout the game, you're basically telling a player,
everyone's the same.
You're basically telling a player, look, if you make a tackle here, there's a good chance you're going to be in a lot of baller, so don't do it. And it's also protecting the guy who's being tackled from. And
then there's the funny side of that, it's a terrible tackle, and then somehow he doesn't give it.
Yeah, and he doesn't give it, which is
that was bizarre. I'm not good at the conspiracy theories, but just as an outsider watcher, that was just fucking bizarre.
Yeah, it's just like, Yeah, you've just been telling him, okay, right, I mean, to be fair, it's a couple of seconds later, he is in a better position to make a tackle, but nonetheless, the actual tackle he does make is not a good one.
Yeah.
To me, it's just a foul, the tackle. I don't think it becomes a card or anything.
Yeah.
And then obviously it's the fact that subsequently, 30 seconds later, Rangers score, but it's not in the same phase of play. And I think anyone who would kind of interpret football would agree with whether you agree with the rule about phases of play or not, you would agree that is not the same phase of play that Rangers ultimately score from. But
so I guess so you would say that it's very commonplace. I mean, we all know in terms of the corner stuff, but would you say to that level is quite commonplace?
It's not something I did, but again, I was 21 and refereeing like amateur and junior football. I never got any higher than that before I stopped. It may be coached into them, or it may not be, or it may be left to your own. And it may have been if I had been on the line a bit more with the better referees and I'd seen them doing it. I was always quite a talker when I was. You can imagine, Tony.
I would be exactly the same.
Anyone who listens to this podcast will not be surprised to discover I was a bit of a talker on the park. And so I would imagine if I saw someone doing it and I could see, actually, there's a lot of benefit to that, because first time I refereed a game, I was timid. I was like, you're going to be, you're not in that situation very often. I didn't play youth football to any decent level beyond like 7-a-side because I was shit. So I wasn't really there. I'd go and watch my brother play. So I picked up, like, I wasn't that I didn't have an awareness of what like grassroots youth football was like, but you're still going to be a bit timid and you're not going to be like very, even like you're whistling, you're going to whistle quietly. You're not going to be like boldy or pointing in how you do make decisions. Totally. You're going to be quite indecisive, and
your body language is going to be like,
By the end of the time when I stopped refereeing, I did not lack confidence. Like I was make decisions confidently when I made them. I didn't mean I got them right, but like there was never anybody in doubt that what I'd given or what I thought I'd seen. And the same with the talking to players, and that comes with time. And I was always very much one for trying to keep on the right side of all the players. So like that aspect of coaching would be a part of that.
Yeah, I think, don't get me wrong, I think there's elements of it that I would definitely partake. I do think that was going a bit too far. I do. I think you're impacting on the game too much. And that again, this is purely opinion from me. Well, I'm not going into any sort of conspiracy. I'm not going into obviously the stuff about using people's names, numbers. I know there was layers and layers and layers to the discussions on this. But yeah, I did feel that one was maybe a step too far. I don't know. Do you agree with that, or?
I can understand it more. I think most people. I think it's less commonplace, but I don't think it would be an isolated incident at all.
Absolutely.
What might have helped and what might be useful is basically if they could show, here's this referee doing this constantly.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's again talking about how the show develops. And again, this is about, time and money, because I'm not just talking about that, but someone actually taking the time to think things through of how you improve it. That costs, because whoever's doing it's going to be paid. But would it be when you see these sort of incidents, and the next time you come on, well, we saw that there was controversy here, so we just want to show how commonplace this is. And then is that something we want in football? Again, I think rather than it being, treating people like adults maybe a little bit.
Because the interesting part is, obviously it must be commonplace enough that they didn't see any issue with including it. And they didn't comment on it. So it suggests to me that it probably is quite common. And the other thing would be, you're talking about budgets and stuff like that. The other thing that won't be overlooked is this is going to be a big recruiting tool for the SFA in terms of getting people to referee. I'm sure it will be, because having VAR in place, I said there's 12 officials taken away every weekend to be VARs now. There's a shortage of referees across the country, so at some point they need to recruit people, and I can imagine this being also, here's
you, Willie Collum, pointing at the.
No, but here's some insight. You can imagine people taking a bit more interest. Actually, that looks a bit different to what I thought it was going to be like, and all the rest of it. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's a wee bit of budget put into this from the SFA.
Well, that's a very interesting angle. Because I suppose I'm making a joke about we need you, Willie Collum, but why not? I mean, there's nothing wrong with with that. We aren't actually sending people to war and to certain death. So that there wouldn't be nothing wrong with there being like stuff at the bottom about how you get involved and like, you know, like an email address to do it to if you'd like to start doing training or whatever. I don't think that would be unhealthy or wrong in the slightest. Would you have liked this as a ref? Like just in general, this whole movement?
Yes, yeah. Well, the communication aspect, I was always pretty big on talking to people after the game as well. The only time I would not talk to people after the game is if like there had been trouble with them, like through just
like disrespect, anger, and
giving it that. Even if they were disagreeing with my decisions, if they come, I always felt it was right as a referee to wait in the centre circle or wait wherever for them to come and approach you to shake hands at the end of the game and stuff, rather than you marching over to them. And if they came up and if they didn't shake my hand or whatever, I'd be like, fine, that didn't matter. But if they came over and shook your hand, usually at that point, they might have a wee word, but they wouldn't be...
But you know, there's the handshake's like a show of respect almost.
Yeah.
It's basically at that point, it disarms the whole any sort of tension at the start.
And it would often be like, they would often be like, oh, what was the penalty for? Or what was, you know, and I could say, look, like what I saw is this.
Andrew Dallas voice, none of your business.
Aye, well, exactly. But that's it. But often at that point, like I would tell them what they thought, and they'd be like, "Oh, fair enough, I didn't think that." And it's like, that's okay. You're allowed to disagree with me. Yeah. So for me, and it's like obviously when I was refereeing an amateur game in a public park in Ayrshire, I couldn't then go back on a Monday morning with a video and go, "I was right, by the way," or sorry, I got that wrong. But and I would even say to them, "Look, like I gave the penalty for this. I actually thought the way the players reacted after that, maybe I wasn't right, but I had to give what I saw."
That was too late.
And do you know what I mean? Like, that's easier to do if the team's like won or whatever anyway. It's like you're not going to do that about like a 92nd minute decisive penalty. But I would have enjoyed it.
I suppose let's talk about the show itself, just like how it looks and the structure of it and stuff. I mean, from my point of view, it was pretty bland. But I suppose, would there be what else could you really do with production for this? Would be a question.
Yeah, I feel like they clearly wanted it to be from the VAR
room
to give it that, and I think it's. To me, the production is in keeping with what it is. I think that is the appropriate level of production for that. Like, it wants to be. It shouldn't be jazzy. It shouldn't be like, you know, if you're watching that as an observer, I don't think you want big jazzy graphics and big flashy stuff right before the referee tells you that your team should have had a penalty in that game too. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's like that kind of austerity to it that it probably is appropriate. I mean, I'm sure other people disagree. I think Gordon Duncan is a brilliant host. I think when Joel and I went to the VAR briefing, what would have been nearly 2 years ago when they were just bringing it in, we went to the VAR room and it was Crawford Allen at the time gave a bit of talk. It was during the World Cup, and one of the older journalists, I can't remember if it was Hugh Keevans, but I could be wrong on that. One of these kind of blowhards journalists anyway, was like kept going on about some decision that had been made at the World Cup that they didn't agree with. And I was sitting next to Gordon Duncan. I don't know if you know who I was, but he was chatting anyway. And he was basically like in my ear saying he's talking a lot of shite. Like, do you know what I mean? Basically, and we were having a wee chat about it. And he clearly understands. He clearly understands like the laws of the game. He's a really good host. He does a lot of stuff.
He is very good. He is very good.
And he knows what he's doing. And it probably is much easier for Willie Collum to speak to someone like him as well, because he's got like obviously he's been paid by the SFA to do this to some extent. He'll present what the SFA are telling him to present, but it'll be easier to have someone who probably knows what they're talking about in that conversation.
It needed to be a host from a football background that couldn't just be any random host that comes into that. And he is quite good, and he's quite engaging, and he's quite softly spoken as well. He's not one that's going to try and steal the limelight, and which is really, again, like you're saying, is not what that show needs. Willie Collum is front and centre, and that's the way it should be. And it's just someone sort of instigating it and making sure that it trundles along.
Imagine doing that exact same show with
Yeah.
Like, just, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
totally. I'm obviously picking a shock jock as like an alternative there, but and there are lots of other people out there.
But that could easily be the angle that would go down.
Yeah,
it could
yeah,
be easily,
yeah.
like, it's not a universe a million miles away that's the choice that's made, because they do want to jazz it up a bit. They are wanting to gain
They want
the views,
eyes on it.
yeah, and then eventually, but you may then move away from the whole point of why it was made, and then. Because, I mean, I was going to ask you about that side of it. Obviously, the structure of it is they just go through the decisions and they ask the question, whereas, obviously, an alternative, it's not the VAR review. I know the English, but even like if we go on the Sky Sports News with Dermot Gallagher style of going through the decisions, and I know it's slightly different because Dermot Gallagher isn't coming from a position of authority within the FA or anything like that. He is just coming as a former referee or whatever. But obviously that's done with a bit of patter, good or bad. I mean, it's up to whoever wants. And the host guy always plays a character of trying to pull him in, and then they have the other two pundits who offer their opinions on it. I mean, is there anything like that you think could work into making this?
It could work, but I would guess the challenge is the editing, right? Because the difference between this and that is like they want to use the audio front and centre. They want to actually have the exact stuff, and that doesn't happen immediately. Like you need to edit all of that together in terms of just like getting the footage out, getting the audio out, making sure it's all broadcastable. There'll be swearing in that, like there'll be 100% swearing in that constantly, I would imagine, especially from the players.
But the guy was wanting the slow-mo of James Forrest.
So all of that stuff is going to be it's got to be tidied up. So that's going to be the delay, because then it probably gets to the point that maybe they can't get that together. Bearing in mind, you would imagine, given that the referees are working a full-time job, doing this on a Saturday or a Sunday, they're not going to then, like, any of this stuff is not probably going to be coming out to like a Tuesday or a Wednesday and it's old news. Like the thing with Sky is Sky can just pull some highlights and ask, like,
do what they want.
You don't need that. But yeah, I can understand. I think that there would be value to that. I think this format is much better for the message they want to put out, which is about educational. To me, it's educational. It's not entertainment.
Yes, yeah.
But notably, like, they've got 54,000 views on. I just was looking at it on there. 54,000 views on the video for there, and I think that's by miles like one of the biggest that they've got on the Scottish FA website. So, for example, they've got Willie Collum doing an interview when he took over as head of refereeing, 1.8 thousand views.
Yeah. I know that.
Some of these like motivational things about people that are like quite inspiring people around football that are like something like 15, 20,000 views. And this is like by a substantial distance the most watched thing on the Scottish FA YouTube account. So there's an interview with Ian Maxwell about the UK and Ireland bidding to host Euro 2028, 284 views. So they're very much.
This is something I was gonna ask. It's like, and this is me talking, and I know there's more me's. It's like the decision stuff is an emotional thing at the time. You care about it at the time, but for someone like me, I move on quite quickly from all this. So it's like blowhards like me would be saying that this is what we need and all that, but then not really be interested in a month later going on and watching it because it's not really something that I'm overly interested in. So we're going to get this, like you were saying earlier, all these people who moaned for years about having this type of thing. And then when the educational, and you have to do it clinically, you have to do education the exact way that you're saying, and that's the way it's delivered in the correct manner. Nobody can be arsed with it because it's quite boring. And it's like all this greeting face for something, and then when it's actually delivered, it's not actually what I really want, and then there's nobody's even fucking arsed about it.
Yes.
Which is a hugely common trait, I would say, in football fans in general.
Yeah, but I think we saw that the numbers were there, and but you look at the comments, and so I just clicked on it there to check that, and the comments are very much along some of the people that were there at front. So, for example, now I'm quoting someone verbatim here. I want to be very clear, just for a sample of what's out there. Andrew Dallas had to become a full-time VAR referee. He said this was due to a hip injury, but it wasn't the case. Andrew is a director within the JR Group, who are Rangers club business partners, and the entirety of their senior and C-suite staff are Rangers fans. Dallas is a Rangers supporter also. Like, that's the sort of comment that you're getting.
Yeah.
I want to be clear, that's a quote from the YouTube channel. I suspect it's not true. I could be wrong. If it is true, it doesn't actually mean that he couldn't be a referee. But but nonetheless, like that. So there is that downside of it. But they're getting eyes on it. That's more than any other video the SFA are putting out. That's like from the Scottish FA page. Like, okay, the Scotland national team page will obviously have lots more views, I would imagine, on highlights, and like the Scotland v Spain and Scotland v Norway games will have Scotland 2 Spain now has 3.2 million views, about 3.1 million which are me.
Yeah, every time someone's pished at half past midnight.
But nonetheless, on the kind of non-highlight stuff, it's like by far the most watched.
So that's you think there's a respect in that the clinical delivery of it and the educational is the only way to do this, which makes it the integrity for the referees and everyone involved. This is the best way to deliver that.
I think so.
Yeah, no. Again, that's opinion, and I'm not best here because I think it's as I said, this is interesting because you're a guy who knows this stuff, and I'm a guy who's very much like just looks at football purely from quite an entertainment point of view, and it's like they put in the park, and I move on for the decisions quite quickly. So like I found that quite dry, but again, if I don't, that's maybe that's exactly how it needs to be. And like you're saying, people really do fucking care about these decisions, and people still talk about decisions that go against them 15 years later. So yeah, I suppose, like you're saying, making it jovial and having a laugh probably wouldn't work whatsoever. But maybe there would be room for maybe like a little bit of debate.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know.
I mean, it might be that I think Gordon Duncan probably can develop to that a wee bit in terms of he can start to be like, some people would say, I think that's the kind of obvious, like, and probably still giving Collum the floor to kind of.
That's more interesting to see Collum in that environment, and again, but these shows can be with stuff like that. Could be how we develop the rules and what we want, and like having Gordon Duncan maybe being a voice of the fans, maybe later on a bit more like, wouldn't you say this would be better in terms of what we want? And then we could have that. Then we've got that conversation, but that conversation's almost happening in public, live, which would seem quite a healthy way of doing these things. I don't know. I'm absolutely the wrong guy to make any types of decisions in anything like this. But Craig, thank you very much. We got a lot out of that, the VAR review, more than possibly I thought. But thanks very much for joining. You're the right guy to have this conversation with. So that was really, really great. So what we're talking is, I probably should have hosted better and maybe spoke about who hosted the show. It was on YouTube, how often it's out, maybe at the start, rather than try to shoehorn in something negative about Hearts. But hey, but yeah, so it is a monthly show that's going to go up on YouTube, and it is hosted by Gordon Duncan. So always be Gordon Duncan and Willie Collum on there every month, going over 5 or 6 decisions.
That's the assumption. We've only got one data point so far, Tony. But you would imagine it's not suddenly going to be Hugh Keevins and Keith Jackson on there just guessing what the decisions are. You'd imagine it's going to maintain a consistent format. So
that's maybe 342,000 views, obviously mainly from Keith Jackson himself. But yeah, thanks very much, Craig. That was good. And again, as everyone else, thanks very much for supporting us. Don't be shy to put in the Discord your feelings about the review show, Twitter, all the other stuff about how you think this should work. Your opinions matter too, not just Willie Collum's. But have a lovely day, everyone, and thanks again for listening.